So tonight he titles his video "Tale of Two Seeds," and I thought that was a pretty clever title because when you get into the subject tonight, there's an analogy to something else, a tale of two somethings. Seeds is what he's talking about, but he's going to reference something else. Watch for that. It clicked with me. I don't know if it clicked with everybody, but watch for it. We'll talk about it afterwards. If you don't get it, I'll share. Also, watch for we've been doing a study on lineage recently with Mark in Matthew. Well, the lineage is one of those things, like Mark explained, we try to kind of move on through, or can go sleeping during it, or get bored with it, or just don't see a real purpose other than you get a few nuggets of information. I think tonight you're going to learn that the lineage is quite there for a reason, especially in Genesis. So I know that's one of those long sessions where you read this one but got that one, and they lived to be this number of years and so forth. But there is a reason behind it. And I think he's going to point that out to us pretty clearly here, which again is a reference to the two seeds. So watch for that. I did learn out of this one that my wife's name is a form of the Ada that's listed, and it's Lamech's wife, one of the Lamech's wife, and she's known as Ornament. Yeah, she's an ornament. Huh? Yeah, she's an ornament. That was the meaning of the name. So I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. I learned that about it. They spell it as Adah in the Bible. You know, she dropped the H a long time ago. His other wife was by the name of Zillah, and she's Shade. So ornaments and shade. Okay. But it was just an interesting tidbit of information I wanted to share.
If God made her, does that mean really it's Godzilla?
Well, if you want to put a little shade on it, I guess so. There's going to be kind of a mention, and I never really thought about it this way, of arts and skills and things that are related to building of community and cities and so forth. I never really thought about it that way in this section of Genesis until he points it out here and clarifies some things about that. So watch for that. I think that's a pretty important piece that kind of flows with the lineage part of it. Outside of that, I don't want to give away too much. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. We got about 30 minutes watch here, then we'll talk a little more after that. How's that? So Jacob, if you will start that up, I appreciate it.
We'll do the right things. First, I'm just going to read from verse 17 to the end of the chapter, and we'll see what happens. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived, and she gave birth to Hanok. And he built a city, and he called the name of the city Hanok, according to the name of his son. And to Hanok was born Irad, and Irad birthed Mehujael, and Mehujael birthed Methushael, and Methushael birthed Lamech. Now, Lamech took for himself 2 wives. The name of one was Ornament, the name of the other Shade. And Ornament gave birth to Yaval. He is the father of those who dwell in the tents and have livestock. And his brother's name was Yuval. and he was the father of all those who play the lyre and the pipe. And Shade, Zillah, she also gave birth to Tuval-Cain. He is the blacksmith. Remember the meaning of Cain's name? Cain is blacksmith. He is the forger of all implements of bronze and iron. And the little sister, Tuval-Cain, was named Delightful, Naamah. Now Lamech said to his wives, Ornament, Shade, listen to my voice. Wives of Lamech, hear my speech. I have haraged, murdered a man for wounding me, even a boy for striking me. And if Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech, just hear the chest pounding, right? 77 times. That's the end of the story. Oh, the Bible.
Can you do that?
Can you what?
Because God said that. Well, because God said, like, he would avenge Cain's death 7 times, but then he's like, I will be avenged 77
Yeah.
times. But it's like, God didn't say that he was going to do that. Like, can you just,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Let's
lay
talk about
claim?
that.
Can you do that?
Yeah. This guy thinks he can.
I know.
Yeah. No, let's play this out. What's happening there? What's happening? What did the 7 times represent when it came to Cain?
Brother, right?
Oh. Well, that's interesting.
I mean, that's the connection.
Oh, right. Brother occurs 7 times.
And
Oh, I've
immediately
never,
in
I've never
context.
thought of that before. I even counted the number.
Yeah.
The number. Oh, it didn't even occur to me. Yeah, interesting. I need to think about that. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of 7s in the chapter. Sure. Here's some more. 7 is a number that means complete. It communicates completeness. Mm-hmm. It's spelled with the letters that are the same letters as the other Hebrew word complete, or to be full. So it has an image of fullness, I think, for Cain. So it represents full vindication in relation to his brother's murder. But remember, what we noted was if Cain lived among the people of Israel, he would be put to death for what he did. But the lawgiver, the one who will give the law, shows mercy, right? The 7 times is the mercy. So, yeah, Lamech is taking Yahweh's mercy upon Cain as license for his own kind of violent streak. And you're right, he just like declares it to be so. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel you're sensing this is an act of presumption, arrogant presumption. Mm-hmm. I think you're exactly right. Exactly right. Where is all this taking place in the context of what line? Cain's line. But you know, Cain built a city. And then the city was named after the sun. And then we just get son. And then the 7th from Adam is Lamech. The 7th from Adam through Cain is Lamech. So he is also the 7th, declaring 70 times 7. How do we feel about the human family, the human species? They build cities, and they glory in blood.
I'll kill whoever I want. God will forgive me. That's his job.
And I get 2 wives.
And I get 2 wives. Let's talk about that. Yeah. Is this Genesis 2:24? Nope. You know, it's interesting, though, this portrait, it pauses in verses 20 through 22, and we get what often comes. We'll talk about parallels to Mesopotamian history in a moment, but we get this little note on, and as, you know, this line was fruitful and multiplied, civilization begins to develop. Yeah? So, the dwelling in tents and livestock, it's different than flocks. Livestock is where you start to really mass-produce these things. The lyre and the pipe, musical arts, the blacksmiths, the bronze and iron. We're kind of making this note here. The human family grows in its skill. But notice what brother's profession is left for last? The blacksmith. What's the next story about? Violence and murder. In early Jewish interpretation, Lamech gets a sword from his son and then commits the murder with the sword. In other words, they're tying together the contextual idea of the first makers of swords, and then you get the first. What do you say? Cain's the first murderer. Lamech is the first, I don't know. It's next level. Careless? I guess Cain's was careless too. But you get my point. It's next level.
Yeah, it seems less careless and more like hubris.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you wound me?
Yeah.
How dare you shame me?
Yes. Yes.
Like anything, he comes up over the top, and his I'm gonna exact justice is I'm gonna just kill you.
Yeah.
Spit in my eye, dead.
Yes, that's right.
You know, give me cornflakes instead of Cheerios, dead.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's that's right. Yeah. And this is it's a portrait. Yeah. If Cain is the slow, premeditated, this is the arrogant, wanton. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. It's just this careless discarding of human life. That's where we're at now, as we're 7 from Adam in Cain's city. That's the portrait of Cain's line here. There's a handful of other things going on. I'll just point out one, just because it's really interesting, and this happens a lot in the book of Genesis. This phrase, wound and strike, is actually a phrase that is used right from the commands of the Torah. It's a fairly famous law in the lines of the Torah. If there is any injury, then you shall assign life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. So in context, this is called the lex talionis. That's the Latin term, the law of equal retribution. So what's funny is Westerners hear this, and we're just like, oh, how brutal these people, ancient people were. In context, this is putting a ceiling on how much retribution you can exact from someone who wrongs you. So the whole point is, if somebody wounds you, you can't cut off their hand, that kind of thing. So it's about equal justice. So notice what Lamech is doing. He's taking the language of equal retribution, and he's just throwing it out the window. So I got wounded and bruised, dead. I'll take it's a life for a wound. That's how Lamech operates. It's really interesting. And then that makes us go back and think, this whole idea of Cain being afraid that someone would find him and kill him, that language right there is taken right from the city of refuge laws in the book of Numbers. So both Cain and Lamech, their fears, their fates as murderers are talked about in the language anticipating the later laws of the Torah. And this happens all the time in the book of Genesis. It's one of these things that makes you see that the beginning book and the beginning stories are all crafted with an eye towards the storyline of the Torah.
Aren't the cities of refuge for unintentional murder or manslaughter, though?
Correct.
Not
exactly right. Yes. Yeah. Aggravated or premeditated murder, you can't have refuge there. Or if you do go there, then you'll be held there until you're put on trial. That's right. Yeah. So these are short little vignettes from the city of Lamech, but the point is this is the line. It's the line of the snake. So at least Cain and Lamech are both choosing the same path as seed of the snake. And then the generations in between, you know, they're just doing what humans do. The human family, it's growing. There's music, there's art. It's not all bad, but even what could be good, a blacksmith of bronze and iron gets associated with the murderer, and there you go. So, do you remember the blood of Abel is spilled, and it cries out from the ground. Now we have more bloodshed, but now it's in association with the city of blood. Anybody? The city of blood. This is a thing. When you get into the prophets, the prophet Nahum will call Nineveh the city of blood. Zephaniah will call Jerusalem the city of blood. It's as if Jerusalem becomes Cain and Cain City. So we're, let's see. Here, I'm going to read one quote here. Yeah, this is a French commentator, André Lecoq. He wrote a trilogy of commentaries on Genesis 1 through 11. He has degrees in biblical studies and in psychology. And he just writes the coolest commentaries in the world, because they're like nerdy history and language, but then he always brings Freud into the mix. And it's just these really interesting readings of, anyway, he's a nerd, and he's awesome. And this is how he puts it. He says, while Cain, Lamech's ancestor, would be avenged 7 times over by God, Lamech takes it into his own hands to satisfy his desire for vengeance through a 77-fold retaliation. At this point, the principle of retributive justice is pushed to the point of becoming a caricature of itself. Moreover, there's a profound irony in Lamech's effrontery, good word choice, to refer to the divine protection of his ancestor Cain. As Lamech's immunity, by contrast, is at the cost of unlimited violence, he has turned divine grace to Cain into an ugly counterfeit. How well said is that? Any trivial inconvenience is occasion for Cain, or for Lamech, to yield to violence. What he demands is not an eye for an eye, but a life for a wound. Okay, this last sentence is my favorite. It's why I wrote it down. He says, Lamech's song is the last spasm, so to speak, of Cain's murder story, bringing the horror of fratricide to its apex. The clouds are gathering that will soon bring about the flood. Yeah? You can just see it. Because all that bloodshed on the ground, Yahweh has to do something about the outcry. He will have to. And the story of the sons of God, then, is the next. We're going to pause for intermission right now for some genealogies. When the narrative begins, the next narrative is about the sons of God and daughters of men, which is like the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. But the whole point is that it's building from Cain to Cain City to Lamech to the sons of God to Yahweh would be unjust if he didn't do something. That's the mounting feeling that you get. Let me just finish the chapter and point out one thing, and then we can pause for some reflection. Notice, like, scene cut right after Lamech is singing his boastful song, cut scene. Back to, and Adam knew his wife again. And she gave birth to a son, and she named him Sheth, because God has appointed me another seed as a substitute for Abel, for Cain killed him. So think about how this works in terms of the storyline. Cain has switched allegiances. So he is now of the line of the snake. But Abel's gone. You have no seed of the woman. So God graciously provides a substitute for the slain one, a new seed, appointed one. And this is now Seth. The next line, now to Seth, to him also was born a son, and he called his name Enosh, human. Then it was begun to call on the name of Yahweh. So think about how this works. Let's go back to our drawing here. Cain's line leads to Lamech. Let's battle axe and the whole thing, yeah, right? With the dead at his feet, and he celebrates. Pool of blood. So this is Lamech. This is where Cain's line leads in the narrative. Oh, yes. It gets spelled Lamech. It's technically Lemech. It's actually not a name. There are two Lemechs in the Bible. The next one comes from the line of Seth in a couple sentences here. And there are no other Lemechs in the Bible. What is interesting is that the word Lamech is the Hebrew word king backwards. In the first city. It's like he's the perverted king of the first perverted city. I don't know. Could be nothing, could be something. I don't know. I think it's interesting. Nonetheless, it leads to our backwards king, whereas the line of Cain, at this point, by the end of chapter 4, leads to someone named human, Enosh. And this brings us to the first worshipers calling on the name of Yahweh. So do you see the contrast here? One line leads to murder and death. Death, the line of the serpent, or the snake, leads to death. The line of the woman now leads to a new humanity that worships. For sure, as the curtain closes, that's the contrast. That's the contrast right here. Thus, Genesis chapter 4. Next chapter?
Genealogies.
Come on. Come on. Who's excited? Who's excited? So it's the first long genealogy, although Cain just had a little short one, didn't he? It was in the narrative, so-and-so, birth so-and-so, so-and-so. So Genesis 5 begins the first long genealogy, 32 verses. And it's copy and paste. There's a formula for every line. Just copy and paste, switch out the names and the years. It's identical phrasing and so on. So it'll put a person to sleep, maybe. But if you've got a dictionary, concordance at your hand, you'll start to notice some things. So let me, you know me by now in my handy dandy charts. Here's something interesting. If you look at the line of Cain that we read already in Genesis 4, do you remember that little list of names? If we begin with Adam, we got Cain and his son Hanok and Irad and Mehujael and Methushael, and then the seventh, Lamech. And then Lamech had 3 sons, Yaval, Yuval, Tuval, Cain. 10 times, say it 10 times fast, right? So you end up with the 7th generation, but 10 sons lifted in a row here. And it ends with Lamech's 2 wives and 7 times 70, vengeance, death, and murder, and so on. You turn the page to Genesis 5, and you begin again. Adam. But now Adam, not through Cain, but through the new seed, Seth. Next is Enosh. Next is Cainan. It's exactly the letters of Cain's name with an extra N on the end. Next is Mahalalel, and Yered, and Hanok, and Methushalach, and Lamech. Do you notice anything?
Names are so similar.
Yeah, not it. Well, some are identical. Enoch, yes, Enoch and Lamech are identical. And Cainan and Cain, Mahalalel, Mehujael, Methushael, Methushalah. Yeah. And the last one, number 10, Noach, how many sons does he have? 3. Okay, there is intelligent life in the drafting and the composing of these genealogies. Notice that at the end of Cain's line, this Lamech, he takes the grace, the blessing that God gave to Cain, the blessing and mercy, and he twists it towards his own purposes. Noach, who's the last person to be named in the genealogy, his dad sings a little song about him when he's born. Genesis 5, verse 29. This is like how do you say? If you were like a city planner and you were trying to plan a whole neighborhood so that everybody has to all come together and walk or drive through this part like a hub or a, what do you call those things? Roundabout, thank you. Yeah, this is it. Genesis 5:29 is the roundabout of the story so far. It all comes together here. So Lamech, the good Lamech, had a son, and he called his name Rest, Noach, and says, this one will give us nacham, comfort or relief from our work and from the itzabon, the grievous toil of our hands, from the ground which Yahweh has cursed. Do you see it? We're reaching back to all of the themes. So we know where the line of the snake went, what Cain shifted allegiances, but now from the seed of the woman, the 10th seed from Adam, this one's name is Rest. And in this one is the hope of comfort and relief from the curse on the ground. Maybe through him there is hope. Do you see this?
Question.
Yep.
So in Genesis 1, are there 10 paragraphs? Or, and does,
7 days,
There's 7
but God
days.
speaks 10 times.
okay.
Yep.
He doesn't speak on the 7th day, though. I'm trying to make a connection. Like, is there something with the 7th-day rest and, like, Noah being the 10th? You get what I'm saying? But,
Yes, totally.
Okay, I
yeah, that's
tried.
right. Yeah. No, that's good. 7 and 10 is another significant number. For lots of reasons. I'm not ready to do a whole class yet on numbers in the Bible, but I'm on my way, maybe in a few years. But 10's on the list. Your intuition is good. And because the 10 commandments, and then the 10 speech acts of God in Genesis 1. So 10's on the brain, for sure. And now the 10 generations that culminate with a promised seed who's going to relieve us from the curse on the ground in some way. So think of these genealogies in tandem. One line leads to the twisted Lamech, the murderer. The next line leads to a good Lamech, from whom comes the one who will take what is cursed and bring a blessing. Do you see this? It's as if the bad Lamech takes God's blessing on Cain and twists it into, right, a curse. May there be 77 times. And the good Lamech takes the ground that has been cursed and hopes for a blessing.
And both their names are king reversed.
And both of their names are king reversed. Yeah. Okay, so I think what's happening here is this is such a great example. The author clearly had 2 genealogies. People have speculated about this for a long time. Is this actually variant versions of the same lineage? And because through oral tradition, the letters became a little different. But really, it's one lineage and so on. That may be. The narrative, as it currently stands, very clearly is saying 2 lineages. But look, even just through the names, they're mirrors of each other. It's as if the line of the snake and the line of the woman, they're very difficult to tell apart. They're like these distorted mirrors of each other. And one leads to blessing, and life. The other will lead to curse and death in the city of man. The other will lead to Noah on the high place, offering an atoning sacrifice for the sins of humanity. And right? So that's for sure what's happening here. So it raises a fascinating question of the quilt pieces that the author had to work with here. And that is interesting. I'm happy to at least give my opinion about it. But the author has taken his materials and arranged them in such a way to make a theological statement based on the names and the arrangement of the material. Lots of questions about this. I can see there's a burning question here.
No, it's not a question. It's just, I mean, they must have had a really short baby name book that both families shared. I mean, it's like, come on, why do they have to be so
Yes.
similar?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
Is there anything essential with the meaning of these names that is eluding us right now, or anything special with that, or not?
Yeah, no, there's suggestions, you know. The names are suggestive. Most wordplay with names are actually never exact, but they're what the name sounds like. So Enosh sounds like humanity. Canaan is Cain, blacksmith. Mahalalel is the word praise, and El, the praise of God. Yered is he goes down. Chanok is dedicated. Methuselah, people have a lot of. So Metu might be some form of death, one sent from death. So it's hard to know. Yeah. What for sure is intentional is the contrasting of the lines. And the fact that the two lines can be difficult to tell apart. What a profound statement to think about where this is all going. Yeah, where like just thinking about think about the stories of the origins of kingship in Israel. It's sourced in bad motives. We want a Melech, Lamech's name backwards, so we can be like all the other nations. And so begins the sordid history of the monarchy and of the city in Israel. And it's sometimes good, sometimes bad. It's hard to know who's a good guy and bad guy once you get into Samuel and Kings. And I think it's exactly the same idea being reflected here. And remember what the story of Cain taught us is we're fluid. Our allegiance, it can be fluid. Even in the same person. Jacob comes out of the womb snatching the heel. Right? He's born a heel grabber, like that snake. But then his own whole story is this slow conversion in fits and starts to becoming more like the seed of the woman, till at the end he's able to generously bless his sons, even his sons who have wronged him. He's able to. So, yeah, life's complex. I think that's kind of what this means here. How you doing? Any more thoughts or questions about?
Yeah, I'm curious about it's a little bit before the genealogy, but the calling on the name of the Lord. It seems like there's so much going on there.
Yes.
And I don't know, it's interesting because wasn't it the case that in Exodus, whenever Yahweh revealed his name to Moses, he's like, oh, that Abraham didn't know me by this name. So is there some implication that the name of Yahweh was forgotten along the line of descendants leading towards Abraham or Abram or any? I'm not sure what the thought is with this verse always puzzled me about why it's there.
Yeah. Well, so again, I think it's part of this contrast. One line leads to death. One line leads to calling upon the name of Yahweh. Gotcha. And calling upon the name of Yahweh, it can be used in different contexts. It's good concordance search where it can be for worship and praise. Thank you, God, for giving us crops. We call upon your name. But it's also the most consistent phrase for calling for Ezer, for help and deliverance. And man, if Lamech's your neighbor, you know what I mean? Deliver us, O Lord. Lamech's, he's going to do something to me. So I think it's probably suggestive of both. The chapter began with worship at the door of Eden. or the door of the garden. And so what we're left to wonder if Cain was exiled out of, not just away from the garden, but out of Eden. Where is this family still living? Well, they're there, just still worshiping at the door. I think that's where our imaginations are supposed to go. They're sticking close. They want to stay close to Yahweh, and they call upon His name.
We might be jumping ahead, but what's the deal with all the old dudes?
Yes, totally. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so the old dudes are next week, so you'll have to come back for them. Did you catch what I asked about on the front end? It's a tale of two seeds, as he named it. What's the thing that comes to mind as he's going through the lesson? What's he referencing, I think? He doesn't say he is, but I think he is. It's something what's that from? There you go. Do you see it? The connection, the tale of two cities? He refers to cities quite often. Cain city and the other city. So it's really what he's talking about. I think that kind of pulls together from the very beginning what he's talking about when he talks about the quilt pieces and the painting, and he's talking about the culture, how they described events and things that happen, which really makes it look at Genesis in a very unique, different way if you think about it. How many of you have caught on to the actual dual lineage that he points out? Cain and Seth. Or did you always look at it as the same line?
I always thought of it as two different lines, but just in a general same purpose.
Well, it's again, when you start listening to these names and you're reading names and Lamech and, Cain and Abel stand out, obviously. But the names further down, Methuselah, Methuselah, and, the similarities between those names, it really doesn't stand out. He said it can be rather confusing because it looks like the mirror image, it can confuse you. If you're not somebody deftly studying that, you're just reading through it, you may not pick that up. So it is a very good point he's pointing out there. It brings Seth in a very important role. I mean, I know I've heard it said, well, Cain was spared because Abel was dead, and that was the only two male children they had, and that's why Cain was spared. Not necessarily so, because Seth was later given to replace Abel. But Cain is still important in understanding the other side, the alternate path, the different choice, I think. Could it be that the names, he said the names have different meanings, like one means king, they're really not a name, but they may be referencing somebody who actually lived, but at the same time are referencing the two paths that were taken in a literary, cultural way. Would that be possible? We have a tendency to want to go literal. 7 days, I'm not saying it's not, but what I'm saying is it makes me think that maybe sometimes we've been too literal and not enough understanding of the meaning behind the story. Because it's starting to come out a little bit better now, isn't it? How he's presented it. It certainly he makes a good case.
Kids things like Apple or Brooklyn. And history, maybe someday they'll look back and go, is that a person's name?
It's possible. But remember back to the Tale of Two Cities. What's the Tale of Two Cities about? Anybody remember? You remember a quote from it. It's about the French Revolution. And in the French Revolution, you have two opposing parties that are combating each other. You remember who they are? The aristocrats. It's the aristocrats, which is what you're referring to, against the commoners. The haves versus the have-nots, in other words. The ones in power, the ones not in power. And it's a revolution. And what's at risk? When you read the story, it's about a risk. What's at risk is love, sacrifice, transformation, and redemption. It's really those factors being played out. It's kind of like the same thing we're talking about. That's why I thought, you know what? I think he's referencing it this way for that reason. I don't know that, but it certainly makes me think that way.
Later in the New Testament, you find the same imagery, but it's more the seed of Adam and the seed of Christ. Or Jesus being the new Adam. And 1 John 3, talks about how the reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. No one who is born of God will continue to sin, because God's seed remains in him. He cannot go on sinning because he has been born of God. This is how we know who the children of God are and who the children of the devil are. Anyone who does not do what is right is not a child of God, nor is anyone who does not know his brother.
So the idea of seed is not foreign. And the idea of two different seeds is not foreign. And Cain representing human seed as much as Seth, but there's a difference in that Seth, in the line of Seth, still worship God.
And also, just to clarify, the word there for sinning is important because it almost sounds like, man, if I sin one time, I'm lost.
No.
It's nomia, which is lawlessness,
Right.
as opposed to harmatia, which means missing the mark. We're going to continue to miss the mark.
Two different things.
It's two different things.
Another story. But good to clear.
But it takes us back.
Cain is lawless.
Was lawlessness.
Lawlessness. And
Violence, loss. But the seed of Seth was
mistakes and
missing
shortness,
the mark, right?
but still honoring who created them. I think that's pretty cool when you start thinking about it. Because you see it even today in our world, don't you? That's still that storyline still works both ways. So I don't know. It kind of impressed me in a way I hadn't thought about it. Again, Cain builds a city, and of course he referenced that later as a city of what? It's referenced later as city of what? Even Jerusalem later gets referenced as city of blood. City of blood. That's the representation of the lawlessness that has consumed. Now, it doesn't mean that you couldn't switch sides of the seed. He brings out later an example of that as Jacob starts out one way, ends up in a different way. So I'm glad he pointed that out. It did make me think of 1 Samuel as I was teaching it, and how I've been teaching it. When we talk about the kingship, the people wanted a king. The first was the king that was from the people. And the second is a king that's more chosen from God. Again, kind of a representation back to this I can see in how they think and how they act. Now, not that Saul was definitely lawless. He certainly wasn't godly. I think he could have gone either way, but he tends to go toward the wrong path more than he does the right path, very obviously, as you look at that. So he mentions that. He mentions that as well. Then you said something a few weeks ago, Mark, about the movie Noah. And that movie was based on the book of Enoch. Correct? Didn't you mention that? Or was it somebody else?
Somebody else.
Okay. Somebody, whoever mentioned it, I don't remember who it was. Was that you, Tommy? The movie Noah that was represented in the book of Enoch, which is not part of the canon, but is one that was looked at years ago and said not to be beneficial, or they couldn't. There were good things about it, but there were negative things, and it wasn't beneficial. It was the ruling of the scholars. Well, whoever said it, I don't remember who it was, but it made me want to listen to watch the movie. I avoided the movie up to this point. Never watched it before. I said, okay, I'll watch it. Because I'm not one that likes to put my head in the sand on something I need to know. And I'll be honest with you, that movie actually makes you think about the same thing that's being discussed right here. It's a little wild. It's definitely different. It's not what I thought. It's disturbing in some ways too. Huh? Do you understand? I get you. I understand why you say that. I understand why you say that, but it is very thought-provoking. And I could see where the story of Noah is in it, based upon what we talked about here. You just have to watch it to see. Anybody else watch that movie? You stuck your head in the sand. You're like me. Yeah. Sometimes it's good to do that, but I think maybe I was sticking it in too much, listening to one side, and I need to listen to both a little bit, and then come to my own conclusion with a little help from my friend. But in the movie, it talks about Tubal-Cain, and I was thinking, okay, Tubal-Cain, that's the same Tubal-Cain that's mentioned in biblical, and he's the one. It's also the line of bronze and iron, which leads to the making of basically weaponry or a form of the murder that Lamech does earlier. So, just a thought, because that's where it leads to he said the path. The guy's commentary said it led to the path of the flood, that changed the humanity in a way that was improved. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There were some things about it that kind of like, I can see it.
It made me look up Enoch. I mean, because I was like, surely to goodness, Cain's son is not the one that was lived off of God and taken up to heaven. Because that's who I thought Enoch was, but there's more than one Enoch.
Yes.
So I don't know if anybody else was mistaken about that, but I was like, no, there's not.
Well, according to what he proposes, the two different lineages, there's two different Enochs. Which obviously some people still feel that's the same lineage, one lineage, but yet it really, I mean, I think you could argue either way on that when you start to look through it. But what do you think, Mark?
I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah,
I was thinking about the whole vengeance thing.
yeah.
That was fascinating to me. And I think about law. When you have a system of justice that if the crime fits the, what's the word I'm looking for? Crime, punishment, yeah. That if
Isn't it in the Beatitudes where Jesus addresses that? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's afterwards.
As far as,
He's talking about the overall, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
it's Sermon on the Mount.
Sermon on the Mount, yeah. That's what I meant, Sermon on the Mount. So he addresses that there, and his take on it is a little bit more like, judge. God is the judge. We don't do a very good job at that, okay? Because we tend to go, I think, too far, which leads to the violence and
Today it's all one up.
vengeance, yeah.
You do this, well, I'm going to do that. Well, if you do that, then I'm going to do this. It just
Right.
escalates and escalates.
Yeah. So obviously Jesus comes along in the line of Seth, but he's not human in the sense, he is human, but he isn't human as well. He's God in flesh. He's both, and he does something that we in flesh cannot do alone. That makes him stand out as the King of Kings, which is also from the lineage of King.
And just one last thing, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much.
No, you're good.
Also, God gets the last word. God is patient, he relents, he waits. But the blood is crying out, the ground is crying out. And in the flood, Cain's line is gone. It's over. Seth's line is the one that continues. Now, obviously, there's still some Cain mixed in there with Seth's line. But God sees and God hears. And I think that's what we have to remember, that God's going to have the final word. God will have the final say. It may not be in our timing, what we want, but God sees it all. And in the end, it will be right, new creation and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Seth's line is going to continue.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus' line. The body of Christ.
Yeah, and it really doesn't matter how long or when that time is up, because obviously God only knows. But when time is up for mankind on general, or humankind on general, we're still getting that same benefit even before that even happens. It's just that life sometimes ends before Jesus returns, but that doesn't mean that there's a difference or a change in what's going to happen. It actually gets a little sooner for you. That's the way I've always looked at it.
Wait, I think it's interesting, and I may be totally off course, but the lineage of the two seeds, even after the flood, and you have Noah's 3 sons, it's the line of Shem that Abraham comes from. And when the Israelites come back out of Egypt, it's Shem's brothers' descendants that they're fighting the territory for. So you have again the,
Yep. Yep.
the repeating.
Yeah. And in Samuel, we've been talking about that as well. The Amalekites were actually a different
Yes.
lineage that's fighting with the Israel, at that moment. So you're seeing it. You're exactly right. And what that basically is saying, and in the movie with Noah and Enoch, he says something. The Noah in the movie says something to the effect of, "I have seen evil even in us, in all of us." So he's identifying the flaw of humanity in everyone. Even in the movie, he's trying to end humanity. He thinks it's upon him to end all of humanity, according to the movie. That's not the Noah we read about. But at the end of the movie, he is shined upon by God. He doesn't do it. He fails at it. But it's also one of the reasons why you need Jesus later, I guess, is what the portrayal there is. I mean, humankind is going to be aided by God, the original creator.
In that lineage, it was talking about how his parents went on to have more sons and daughters. And I just hadn't really thought about how Noah saw his family even washed away, not just strangers. It's just sad.
Very, very thought-provoking, whether it's, I'm not saying it's something we need to focus on. Obviously, biblical is the way we got it is good and what we need. But there's things in it too that could be beneficial, I think. All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, I guess we're good. Hey, thank you.